Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Now today, let us begin with another chapter, that is tissues. So tissues, these are the group of similar cells which are performing a particular function. Till now, we have studied a lot about the cells. Now the cells, we are continuously saying that all the living organisms, they are made up of cells. Now if they are made up of cells, then how they are related to the tissues? That's what we are going to begin with in this particular chapter, and we'll understand that how these group of cells are forming the tissues so as to form a complex type of multicellular organism. So let us start with the chapter, and in the introduction let us brief out previous information. We are saying continuously that all the living organisms, they are made up of what? They are made up of cells, right? Now the number of cells in these living organisms may vary. They may be single, or it may be more than one. So on the basis of number of cells, these organisms can be unicellular organisms or they can be multicellular organisms. So the unicellular organisms, they are those particular organisms which are made up of only one particular cell. Or in other words, we can say that if a single cell can perform each and every life-sustaining function, then it is known as an unicellular organism. Can you think of such type of life-sustaining functions? What are those particular functions which are performed by our body so as to maintain our life? That is like digestion, or we can call it as nutrition also. Then it could be respiration, excretion, circulation. So all these particular functions, they are contributing to maintain our life, and all these, when they are performed by a single life itself and they are able to multiply themselves, then it should be known as an independent unicellular organism. Contrastingly, we can say the opposite side will be multicellular organisms. So if unicellular is made up of a single cell, then it is bit clear that multicellular is made up of so many cells. Now these cells, they are or these organisms, they are made up of more than one cell. Now we can say more than one cell means how many cells? Are they 2, 3, 4? No, these are millions and billions and trillions in a complex functional organism. The number of cells is there is no limit for the number of cells. It can vary. It can be as much as trillions or more than that. So now you can think of the examples. That the unicellular organism, we can say the example could be a bacteria. You remember what is bacteria? It is a prokaryotic organism in which the nucleus is not well developed. It is not bound by membrane. So this particular bacteria is the simplest form of life. Besides this, there is another example, that is euglena. Now this euglena is also a unicellular organism, but it is not a prokaryotic. Rather, it is made up of a eukaryotic cell. Now you remember what is eukaryotic cell? Eukaryotic means a cell which is having true type of nucleus. That means what? That means a nucleus is separated from the cytoplasm by a membrane, and that membrane is known as what? It is known as nuclear membrane. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, best example you can understand is you yourself, that is human beings. or in surrounding whatever living organism you can see, like plants, birds, or we can say all animals which are multicellular, which are belonging to higher groups. They all are coming under the, they are considered as a multicellular organisms. Why? Because they are made up of so many cells. Now, you can see the picture here. This first picture is giving us idea about a bacteria. Now, this bacteria is what? It is a unicellular organism. You can see in this case the organism is having this particular nuclear material, that is DNA, and it is not separated from the cytoplasm, that is it is embedded within the cytoplasm itself. So this particular region in which the nucleus is present is known as nucleoid. Besides, the membrane bound organelles are absent, but they do have a capsule, a cell wall, a plasma membrane, and other structures like ribosomes, cytoplasm, etc. They are having this whip-like structure which is known as flagellum. And all these will together help in performing various functions of the living organisms. On the opposite side, we have shown a diagram of a bird, that is duck. Now this duck, you can see there are many different parts, like it is highlighting a beak, or it is highlighting the eyes, neck, head, etc. So many parts are there within an organism. Now can you think one more thing now, that all these organisms, multicellular organisms, they are made up of cells, and cells are the basic functional and structural unit of life. Now here you can see there are different parts in this living organism, beak, eyes and all. So can you say any similarity in these particular structures? You cannot. Right? So these parts which are shown here, these small little units are known as the organs. Now what we mean by organ? So organs, they are the complex organization of different tissues. What are tissues? They are a group of cells which are performing a particular function. So in the case of multicellular organisms, we can observe that the cells are not identical. All these cells, they are differentiated. The basic components are same. They all are having those same components as we have studied in the previous chapter. That is fundamental unit of life. All organelles and all those parts we have studied, they all are present in all of these cells present in different organs or in the different tissues. But here the different group of cells have been assigned a special function, and according to that function they are actually they are arranged and they are performing it, they are functioning. So we can say that the multicellular organisms they all are made up of many cells, but still they shows different level of body organization. Now what these levels of body organization, they are shown here in this particular diagram. Let us begin with atoms. There are these there are you know that there are so many chemical compounds in our surrounding, right? So the smallest unit is what? It is atoms. All chemical or all molecules are made up of atoms. These atoms, they will unite, they will bind with each other in different ways so as to form the molecules. Now these molecules, they will constitute a organelle. They will constitute an organelle. Now these molecules, how they are differ from these organellar molecule and the normal that we are studying or we are using in general. So basically the molecules which are found in the living organization, they are known as a biomolecule. So these biomolecules, they will form the functional unit. They will comprise a special unit or compartment known as organelle. There are different organelles as we have studied. These are the small functional compartments or the functional parts of the cells. For example, mitochondria, nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, all these are the examples of organelle. So we have studied about the different organelles, its structure and the functions. So now you know how many different kinds of organelles are there in a cell. All will they will start functioning together in a proper coordination with each other, and thus when such a system is built, then it is known as a cell. Now these cells, they will the group of similar cells. We have studied there are different type of cells. They have different shape, they have different size, and they have different function. So accordingly, when a same type of or similar type of cell will unite together so as to get specialized for a particular function, then it will be known as a tissue. So how we can define a tissue? Tissue is a group of similar type of cells which are performing same particular function. Now these tissues, they will organize, they will form an organ, and the organ will form the organ system. Can you think of an example of organ here? Like stomach. This is an example of organ. Now where this organ is present and what the function is of stomach? It is involved in the digestion of food material. So you can think now, what are the other parts which are involved in the similar function of digestion, like esophagus, like tongue, like intestine, and so on. So all these units which are involved in this particular function of digestion, that would be known as an organ system. So now you can see that how a single unit cell is forming a base for all these living systems. So the smallest unit would be known as an atom. If it is considered in a living system, it would be an organelle. And then from organelle, it will form a cell, then tissue, then organ, and then the organ system is formed. Now many organ systems are there in a living body. Like there is one of the example is digestive system. Let us compare it with the another one, that is, let us say, a circulatory system. So all these systems are also performing their functions in a coordination, and thus when such a system is built, when such all required functional organ systems are constituted and they interact with each other, then a living organism is formed. This is how a living body is organized and is showing different levels of its complexity. Which is the simplest part? A functional simplest part, that is cell. And the highest will be the organ system. Within the cell there are many compartments, they would be known as an organelle. But a single organelle cannot be called as a living cell or a living body. And this is why we are saying the smallest unit of life is a cell, but a single cell is also made up of so many compartments. They are known as organelles, which are the chemical compositions of different molecules. So now, atoms. As we have compared different types, we have studied about different type of system or the organs or the cells. Now can you think of this? We are continuously saying that these parts are coordinating with each other so as to perform their function. So basically this property is actually known as a division of labor. So this division of labor, it is actually a property, it is a property of distribution of work in different cells or the tissues or the organs. What does it mean? It means that if we compare a multicellular organism, then we have said they are made up of different groups of cells. Then these group of cells would be known as tissue. Then different tissues together will form a functional organ. So each organ is having a specific role in of its own. Let us say, if we are saying the stomach, then stomach is meant for what? Temporary storage of food and its digestion. In a stomach, protein is digested towards smaller units. So stomach is having a specific function. Now if we say another organ, like esophagus, so what is the function of this esophagus in the digestive system? It is serving as a long tubular structure, and it provides path for the movement of food material from our mouth to the stomach. From the mouth, you cannot just throw the food into your stomach. It needs a proper system, and that, or a particular path, and that path is provided by an esophagus. So this esophagus and organ, they are the part of a same organ system, but each is having a different role. Similarly, there are different organ systems like respiratory, like any other you can compare, like digestive. So each particular system is having a particular function. So if such a quality is there, then such a property in which the different part of your body is performing a different function is known as division of labor. Now don't get confused here. Don't think if your stomach is meant for digestion and receiving the food, then it is selfish. It won't provide it to other part of the body. No, it has to work in coordination with the other systems. So if it is meant for digestion, then they have to be digested. For that, the energy is required. For energy, our respiratory system is also helping. The oxygen is provided, and that oxygen would be actually helping in extracting the energy from the digested food material. And also they are forming the ATP molecules, so they would be providing energy for different reactions, different metabolic reactions. So in short, we can say there is a distribution of work among different group of cells in a multicellular system. For example, the muscular system, or muscular tissue, is meant for the movement of body or the movement of internal organs, like heartbeat. Continuously heart is contracting and relaxing. So this contracting and relaxing is actually it is a movement of the tissues, and that particular movement is provided by the muscular tissue. Then comes your nervous tissue. It transmits the messages. Blood, meant for transporting material from one part of the body to the other part. Besides, at a single cell level, also we can observe the similar division of labor. So what is that? You can compare it. Function of mitochondria, it is energy synthesis of energy-rich molecule, right? Or it is a site of respiration. Endoplasmic reticulum, in that it is meant for lipid and protein biosynthesis. Golgi apparatus, what is the main function? Processing of various molecules. So each part is having a particular function, and then they are helping others to perform their own function also. So this type of property is known as division of labor. So now let us begin with the topic tissue. Now we are saying that tissue is what? It is a group of cells which are similar in their structure and which work together so as to perform a same particular function. So such a group is actually termed as a tissue. Now these tissues, they can be classified. Before that, let us assume one thing. If you observe in your surrounding, how many type of organisms you can observe? There are many, but broadly you can classify them as the plants and the animals. What are plants? Plants are those organisms which can synthesize their own food. So and they cannot move from one place to the another. Whereas the animals, these are the organisms which are dependent on the plants for their nourishment, and they can move from one place to the another. Now these two basic points, they are so much contradictory to each other. They are totally opposite of each other. Now just imagine, if such a vast distinction is appearing in these two types of living organisms, then what will be the condition of their own body organization? What type of cells or the tissues must be forming their entire body? As they are so much different from each other, don't you think the internal structural complexity is also going to vary from plant among these two group of animals? That is, of course, is happening here, and therefore broadly these tissues, they can be classified into plant tissues and in the animal tissues. Now if we are saying this point that they are very much different from each other, then their tissue is also different. Now what you have to think is, why is it so? Why? The answer is given in the form of its nourishment habit, nutritional habit. Plant is autotrophic, animal is heterotrophic. Plant cannot move, they are fixed at a location, and animals can move. This is the first base so as to explain that why they need a different type of tissue organization to make a living functional system. And if we proceed, we can say that if these 2 points are present, that how much difference is being created. Let us study the base, or let us compare the plant and the animal tissues now. So plant tissues, we said plants are autotrophic and they are stationary. So this is the first criteria to decide that what type of tissue should be present in the plants. So the very first point here is that these organisms, since they are having a stationary habit, they cannot move from one place to the another. And secondly, they are showing autotrophic mode of nutrition. So these two properties, the tissues, they should be designed on the basis of these two particular features. If they have to perform the food formation process, then they need to have the specific type of cells over there. They need to have chloroplast. We have studied the chloroplast. The chloroplast, it is a site of photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? It is a synthesis of food material from carbon dioxide and water in the chlorophyll containing cells by using light energy. So here we are saying they are using the carbon dioxide and water from, now these two things will be available in the surrounding. But what about the chlorophyll? This chlorophyll is present in the chloroplast. So these type of tissues, they must have the cells which are containing the chloroplast. Secondly, they are stationary. That means they have to stand straight at a particular fixed position. That means its grasping over the ground should be very strong. Now if this is required, then the tissue should be very well developed and it should be able to provide mechanical strength to the organism. So this is the first basic criteria for the designing the tissues in the plants. Now opposite to this is an animal. Animal, they have high mobility. They can move from one place to another in search of its food, shelter and the reproductive partner. Besides, it can run away from the existing situation. If suppose the climatic situation changes, if suppose a heavy rainfall starts, it begins, then these animals, they can run away towards a safer side. Now if they can move away from one place to another, then the flexibility should be there. Then we can say the mobility or the movement of skeletal tissue should be it should be high. So as they are moving from one place to another, the design of a tissue should be according to that habit. Secondly, they are showing heterotrophic mode of nutrition. What do you mean by heterotrophic? Now it means that the organisms are dependent on the other organisms for their own nourishment. Now from this point of view, the organisms could be like they could be herbivorous, carnivorous or omnivorous. Now when these three categories are there, then of course they have to digest it accordingly. If only plant product is to be digested by an animal, the intestinal strength or the digestive system should be designed accordingly. If we are dependent on the cellulose diet, then we should have power of digesting the fibers. Opposite to that, if we are dependent on flesh, then we should have according enzymes that should be able to digest the flesh material. So this is completely different from the plant tissue. So the entire tissue has to be designed according to this particular habit. Not only this much, if we compare these heterotrophic modes, then there could be saprophytic organism, holozoic organisms, or there could be parasitic, right? Parasites, those which are residing inside the host body, and they're consuming those simplified form of food from the animal's body or the plant's body. So they don't have to digest it, they are already consuming that digested food material. On the opposite side, if we compare saprophytes, then they are feeding on the dead and decayed materials. Or in holozoic, the organisms are consuming the complex food material and they are digesting it within the body. Like we all, we are eating food and we are digesting it in the alimentary canal. So according to these two habits, that is its property of movement and its property of nutrition. So on this basis the tissues are designed basically. Next point is that in the case of plant tissues, in the case of plants, tissues are made up of dead and supportive type of tissues. We said that these plants are able to, they are stationary, they cannot move from one place to another. So they have to withstand, they have to tolerate all the changing conditions in their surrounding, right? So to tolerate those conditions, those harsh conditions, they need a great mechanical strength. And this mechanical strength that is going to support the organism so as to withstand, so as to withhold its position at the same place. And for this purpose, it is best fulfilled by the dead tissues. So plants, they are comprised of mostly the dead tissues. Why? Because they need a support. And dead tissues of course provide great support. Besides this, opposite to this, in the case of animals, the dead tissues are less common. In fact, we can say most of the tissues in an animal is actually living. Can you think of several examples of dead tissues here? Like your nails. This is the example of a dead tissue. But we don't need dead tissues much. What we need is living tissue. Why is this so? The reason is because we are moving from one place to the another, and for that we need a constant functioning of these particular cells, and the functioning of cells is possible only when it is in a living situation. Now if we compare a dead cell with a living cell, then you can imagine now that these dead tissues, they need less energy for their own maintenance. So the required amount of energy in a plant tissue is less as compared to the animal tissues. Now, why they need less and why animals need a more amount of energy? The reason is same, because in the case of plant tissues, they are not moving from one place to another. They are not performing those complex activities which are performed by the animal tissues. So, they need a less amount of energy. In the case of animal tissues, they are constantly moving apart, either from one position to the another position, or even if they are not changing their position, even then they need more energy so as to perform the complex functions of the body constantly. None of the system is supposed to be stopped even for a while. Suppose, let us say, if your heart stops beating for a fraction of a second, what will happen? We will have a heart attack. And if you have a heart attack, it may be fatal also. We may die. Why? Because if your heart stops functioning, the blood circulation would be stopped. If blood circulation is stopped, then what will happen? Energy transmission would be stopped. And this is why we are saying we need a constant supply of energy. So most of the tissues are supposed to be living here. Further, in the case of plant tissues, they are actually differentiated. They are divided into two categories, that is meristematic and permanent tissue. You know what we mean by this thing, or what is the base for such type of differentiation here? So actually this differentiation is on the basis of its cell dividing capacity. We said that the plant tissues are made up of dead cells, right? Most of the cells are dead. But think now, if all of the cells of a plant is a dead tissue, do you think the life is possible? Do you really, can you imagine that this plant would be known as a living organism then? No. So in this case, there are two groups of tissues. One tissue which is having a high capacity for the cell division. They can divide continuously. Whereas there are some other group of tissues in which the dividing capacity is limited, or it is nil. It is completely zero. So if the cell is having this dividing capacity or the cell division capacity is high, then those type of cells or the tissues would be known as meristematic tissues. They could be known as growing tissues. Whereas if the cells are not having the limited dividing capacity, or they have lost the capacity for division, then they would be known as permanent tissue. Now these tissues, they could be living or they could be dead, but these are called as the mature tissues. Now these tissues help in providing the support to the living organism. Meristematic, it helps in a growth of the organism. So here, in the case of plant tissues, there are two groups of the tissues. Meristematic, that is a growth tissue, and a permanent, that means a non-growing tissue. Now such property is not actually present in the case of animal tissues. There is no such criteria with respect to the cell division so as to differentiate them into various groups. Rather, in this case, the cell division capacity is uniform. All cells are having equal capacity for the cell division. Why? Because they all are living and they need a constant supply of energy, and they are performing all of the functions continuously. So there is no such differentiation. If they are living, definitely they will be having a capacity for the cell division also. So such type of differentiation into growing and non-growing tissues is completely absent in the case of animal tissues. Next point is that in the case of plants, these meristematic tissues that we have discussed here, it actually supports the increase in height of the plant. We can say these are known as the growth tissues. They help in the growth of the organism continuously throughout their life. In case, let us say, now don't get confused here. If a height of plant is increasing, and no doubt it is supported by the meristematic tissue only. So this height is increasing here, but can you think up to what level it is going to increase? It is going to stop after particular stage, right? And that's what we have observed in our daily life also. If you look around, you can see that there are tall plants or the tall trees or the small plants, herbs, and everything is there. But each is having a particular limit. Each cannot grow up to a highest peak, or beyond that peak. These plants are not going to increase in the height. That is for sure. So at that time, do you think the growth is going to stop? No. In that case, primary and secondary growth will take place throughout the year, throughout the life. So this type of growth is actually shown, it is supported by the meristematic tissue. Plants, they shows a growth up to a very high limit, and this is possible because of such tissues. In the case of animals, they do not show increase in height after reaching the maturity. So do you think after that the growth is going to stop in the animals? No. In that case, still the growth is going to take place, and that is actually in a way like repair. It is in a repairable form, or the secondary growth will continue to take place. You can compare the height of a plant or of a tree and an animal. If you compare, you can clearly think of the difference what we want to explain. That is, plants are so high in their height, and that is possible because of the meristematic tissue. Animals, they are having a limited height, right? So after this, and this height is achieved up to its maxima at an age of adolescence, or during after the secondary growth. So after this, at the beginning of or the end of adolescence, what do you think? After that, the growth is not taking place. Growth is still taking place. How we can justify this point? We cannot observe it. In plants, we can observe in terms of flowers, in terms of different fruits, in terms of growing of new leaves, etc. Here, in animals, are we having like a finger? It is detached and new finger is growing over there. Is it so? No, it is not so. So what does it mean? It means that now still the growth is taking place, but it is internally happening. Let us say, example, if we get some injury, what will happen? Let us say there your skin has been, there is a rash on a skin. Now what will happen? The point where the rash has occurred, the skin has been flattered. Now the new cells will grow over there, they are going to regenerate, and they will cover the particular area. And thus the skin injury would be recovered. So this growth of new cells is an example of a growth in repairable terms. Besides this, we can see secondary structures growing, like in a male, we can say development of the reproductive system. Similarly, in the females, the reproductive system it begins to mature now, and the body becomes ready for the process of reproduction. So further, after a particular age, growth is going to take place in a controlled manner in terms of its repair mechanism, and in terms of its secondary growth. Secondary growth with respect to its hormonal changes and its reproductive system's growth. Besides this, now from all these points, the point which is very clear is that the organization of plant tissue is very simple, because there are no complex processes like respiration. It is simply taking place by the diffusion. Then let us say transportation or the circulation of various materials. They don't need a circulatory system. They are not having a heart, and there are no arteries or the veins so as to transport the material. How it is happening here? It is with the help of different group of tissues, which is the example we can say like xylem and phloem. So here no complex organ systems are observed in case of plants, whereas in the case of animals, their organization of tissue is highly complex. Various type of tissues, they will form the organs will form the organ system, and each organ and the organ system is going to function together in a coordinated form so as to fulfill the need of each other, and thus a living system of an organism would be generated. So we can now, at the end of this comparison of these tissues, we can just summarize one point, that plants and animals, they both are the multicellular organisms, but comparatively plants are simpler than that of animals. Simpler as they are, they don't have to move from one place to another, and they are autotrophic. So they don't, whereas animals, they need to search their food for themselves, and for this particular requirement they have to move around. So for these particular things, they need a constant supply of energy, and this is why plants are made up of dead tissues, dead as well as living, whereas animals, they are having maximum number of living tissues so as to fulfill their basic requirements. So this is how the tissues are showing variations among the plants and the animals. Thus in this chapter we are going to study about the plant tissues and animal tissues separately. So next we are going to begin with plant tissues. Till then, thank you so much. Have a nice day.